as we talked the other night, I was working on the modes, which, as we talked about, has been the bane of my existence. Trying to understand it, trying to figure it out, trying to work it in to not only what I'm playing, but also what I'm hearing as we talked. Just trying to recognize that. Um, I'll say that working it over chords is definitely put a better perspective for me, a better realization or recognition, maybe is a better word, over what I've been seeing
Mhm.
or hearing. And the other thing I've been working on is just the tapping, just trying to get that um, under my fingers. Just trying to get. It's not so much it's a combination of the right and left hand working together, but where I've been struggling is just making changes with my fretting hand, and trying to work that in.
Yeah, shifting
And not
emphasis.
only that, but also trying to figure out how to switch strings as well, trying to get that type of coordination under. And so it's been a slow process. It's slowing it down in order to make it sound smooth and not those awkward pauses in between.
Right.
Um,
So yeah, I wanted to say something about the modes. The first thing that you were saying, as you go to learn, of course, all these patterns, the key to make each one actually sound like the mode that it is to reference, the root of that mode. Because of course, if you don't do that, there's no telling. I mean, every mode is every other mode. All the 7 diatonic modes could be interpreted, all the modes of C major could be interpreted as C major or A minor or D Dorian or E Phrygian, etc. So what's the difference? Well, the difference, they all sound different, but only if you make an effort to hear that root note. So if you're playing the notes of C and you're playing them over D, well, it's D Dorian. But as you play the scale, are you really over D? Well, no, there is no D sounding. There's no, sustaining chord or bass tone. It's a matter of you playing the D and getting your ear oriented toward that as a root, or playing the arpeggio of D. So I would play D, I would play D minor arpeggio, D minor 7 arpeggio, and then play the scale and play it octave to octave. And maybe even weave it around, contour it, play it as a melody. Then you're really going to hear it as a D. And then you're going to hear what Dorian really sounds like. If you don't do that, a lot of people will go and learn the modes and they say 3 note per string scales. And it's like, well, that'll teach you the shape of that portion of the neck, but it's not really teaching you what D Dorian sounds like. It's just the notes of C major at that point on the neck, So that was the first thing I wanted to say, is just to clarify. And I know we've kind of talked about this before, and that's what the chord progression, when we talk about seeing the modes in the chord progression at work, what that chord progression is really doing is orienting your ear to a root at that point, and then playing that same scale, the notes of the key, playing it. So we were in E minor, for example, and then you move to a C chord. Well, now that you play C as a root and you play the E minor scale around that C note, but come back to that and hit that, now you know what C Lydian really sounds like. Instead of, if you don't, then you're still hearing the notes as E minor. So that was the first thing. So maybe that will clarify it a bit more. And then the other thing you were saying about, as you tap and trying to get the hands to work together, of course, everything just comes down to sounds in time. And so every note is supposed to last a certain amount of time. And there's always this tendency, because we want to do it faster than we can do it. So there's always this tendency to want to speed it up. Problem is, we tend to speed up the parts we can, and then the parts we can't don't get sped up. And when that happens, everything becomes uneven, and then it doesn't work. It doesn't sound right. And of course, the real key to that is to realize, wait a minute, the thing that I really want to improve is that one connection of that note to the next note where it's difficult. So as you go to change strings, you know, you tap, you do your hammer pull. I would say every time you reach a point where your mind freezes up or you're not sure or there's a hesitation, play up to the hesitation and then the next note, and then stop after the hesitation. That way, as you repeat that, you can get rid of that hesitation. You're not done though, because now you have a new hesitation. You play up to the next string and you've got the first note on the next string with no hesitation, but now you need to play through that and play the next couple of notes on that string. So then you have to roll into the difficult spot, play through it smoothly at a speed you can, and then add a couple notes, and then do that repeatedly until you have a flow. Then you can play the whole thing with a flow. And that's, you know, it's there's no magic to it. You know, it's just really a matter of where you direct your focus. So I know again that you're doing this already, but it always bears repeating, because there's this tendency, we all have this tendency to say, I want, this is what I want to do, and then you want to push through it, and so there's this interplay all the time between desire to move ahead and push through and do better, and also acceptance of where you are. And we have to be in that interplay in guitar and life and everything. That's kind of the story on and on. So, but it's good to see that I can see that you're improving, and that's really the progress is as long as you got progress, that's success. Man, I want, that's the one thing that I would tell people more than anything is to don't get discouraged with where you are, even if it's going a little more slowly and you think, oh, I can't do what I want to do. Well, okay, welcome to the club. We all want to do better, right? Wherever you are, you probably want to do better, but that's part of the human condition. We want to get better at something. You want to improve something. And the bottom line is that you have to work with where you are. So you have to accept where you are and work within that to get to that next step. So cool. Let's go ahead and move. Let's go ahead and move on. And if we have time, we can come back and circle back through. Paolo, you're next. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, okay. That's good, because I have put the headphone on. Okay. Now my question is a little generic. It's just curiosity. As I keep on studying on your methods, on your books, and you know, every time there is something deeper, like there's always a deeper level, especially now that we can associate it with the video. So my question is just a curiosity. So when you edited those books, when you were producing those books, did you have everything clear in your mind? Like, okay, I got some kind of a clear project, so I am going from this to this to this to this, and everything was clear, and so it is still working good after many years, or did it just happen like spontaneously, and at the end you realized that it was a good method?
Okay. You know, somebody else had asked recently about, like, as I was putting those methods together, what was I thinking about the why behind it? And of course, there is a why, and there's a lot of thought that goes into that. That doesn't happen by accident. I've never really answered that question before, because I don't know that anyone, it never occurred to me that anyone really cared that much about that aspect of it. Most people just care about the fact that it works. They want to get out of it what they want to get out of it. And this is certainly a deeper question. I've been thinking I'll do a video on it, but I could answer in a couple of just kind of a general sense. I know that I wanted, through the course of the method, to cover, you know, all of the different musical kinds of, you know, modalities that are being played across a range of styles. I knew that I had to start with simple stuff and I had to gradually increase the difficulty. I knew that the difficulty is both rhythmic. So I want to start with simple rhythms and build that up. It's not just about speed, although that's a component of it. So each, you know, the musical knowledge, a breadth of styles, development of rhythm, facility with rhythm, so that you have rhythmic control, and, you know, it's not just, just to play fast without regard to time. A variety of different phrasing approaches, you know, and of course, speed. Each one of these I looked at them each as a thread. And that thread was going to start simple in chapter 1. And then at the end, I had that song that I had written, that instrumental tune. And I felt like, okay, well, that's a pretty good challenge. So let's put that at the end as the musical challenge. And then I'll work backwards from there and then fill in the gaps. So then I would figure out, okay, you know, I need to start at a moderate tempo, 8th notes. I kind of knew the starting point. And then I just gradually figured, what can I do to increase, you know, tempos slightly as I go through and hit the different styles? Well, as I increase tempo, it's not really just as simple as that, as increasing tempo, because it's a whole lot easier to play, you know, instead of playing constant, you know, picking every note, it's a whole lot easier to do hammers and pulls. But like in the second solo in metal lead guitar, there's a certain pattern that I'm using. It's a pretty quick tempo, so it's a big jump from the first chapter. But I always interpreted that first chapter as really just being, let's get on the same page. It's kind of a review. If you have any trouble with that chapter, then I'm thinking you're not ready for this method, because I'm kind of starting for intermediate players. And so that was the opening of the funnel to get into it. But chapter 2 is where it really took off. But what I did to make it easier is I used a repeating figure. And there's really only 2 repeating figures, you know, one in that second solo. One is the pattern, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, well, so measure 3. It starts with this 4 times on this repeating pattern, and it's downstroke, hammer, pull, and then an upstroke on the next string. So right there we had string crossing, but it wasn't terribly difficult. And it was also formatted rhythmically to build this alternate picking approach, because that's really what I was trying to get to. And you don't get there all at once. You have to get there a piece at a time. So I put in the simple mechanic, and then there was also one other mechanic later that was repeated, which was all on 1 string at a time, downstroke, hammer, down, up. So it's a gallop rhythm in the pick, and it's synchronized with the left hand. And those 2 ideas were like, at some point, you've got to jump in and look at the mechanics and say, I'm going to grab a mechanic, this mechanic or that one. I could have chosen any number of different mechanics, but that like worked musically, and it worked as a starting point that would set a base, like a baseline, which then we want to continue in the next chapter to, to continue to broaden. And yet each thing that it broadens to sort of has a consistency, mechanically speaking. And that's why I think the whole thing works. But in any case, it definitely took, I mean, I wrote a lot of stuff, and I started with the concepts that I wanted in each chapter. And then I went in and I started writing the music, and I selected the tempos for it. And then I selected the musical phrases that I felt wouldn't be too difficult at that point, but that would work. So chapter 2 was, you know, let's push up the speed and let's get certain mechanics down. And then let's connect all that together and make it music. Chapter 3, I actually slowed down, but it got more difficult because we got a lot of bending approaches there. We have, you know, slow bends up, bends down, pre-bends, holding a bend while you hit a different string. There's a lot going on there. And it's actually a little harder too, because it's triplets. And when you introduce alternate picking on triplets, you know, things get a little bit more difficult. Notice though that it's still not super hard, because there's a lot of, like in chapter 3, there's a lot of evenness of the notes. Not every note's picked.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, sorry, I lost the connection for a while, yeah.
Okay, but all I wanted to say is that it's moving upward generally in a level of difficulty, but there are a lot of different aspects to difficulty. So just because something's faster, that's only one way to make it more difficult. There are other ways. And so chapter 3 goes into developing a bunch of aspects of playing that are more difficult, but at a slower tempo. And then from there on up, we go ahead and keep building. But, you know, I think that I will do a video about that. And maybe if you guys are interested in how that works, you know, I can put in some of the specific ideas of why was a certain thing covered at a certain point. So.
Yeah. This, to me, it should be the thing. I'd love to.
Okay, cool. Well, I've got
to have a video about it.
I've got it written in here, and I just got to figure out when I can get to it here. Probably it probably won't be until March, April, because the next month's pretty well laid out already. But all right, Tony, how are you doing? And
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Troy, hi everybody. I'm Tony. I'm doing pretty good. Richmond has a nice storm today, so I just get to go outside and chip ice off the sidewalk every so often, so I don't end up tripping and falling.
Is that Richmond,
Virginia?
Indiana?
No, sir. Richmond, Virginia.
Oh.
Although I'm tightly coupled to Angola, Indiana, northeast. Ohio. So I had a couple of questions, and we can kind of address them in any order or fashion. And I think they're kind of tied because they're all in lead metal lead guitar, volume 1, chapter 1. And your point was that chapter 1 is a review, and if you can't play it, you're probably not ready for the method. I can't play it. I'm probably not ready for the method, but I think a couple of questions will straighten it out, and I might even get ready. So question number 1 is related to vibrato depth. I haven't watched this video in a while, but I think in the sound in the story video, when you talked about vibrato depth, and it may still be how you think about it, I think you tried to get us to push the vibrato depth to the next note in key. Vibrato depth isn't just like, it's to the key. Is that still where we are?
Well, there aren't any hard and fast rules about it. Okay, wait. First thing, I guess I should have guessed Richmond, Virginia, because Richmond, Virginia is the biggest Richmond in the US, but I grew up in Indiana and not too far from Richmond, Indiana. So for some reason, for me, when I hear Richmond, I just think of that one. But in any case, vibrato. So if you're doing vibrato on a string bend, the way that is accomplished is you go up to pitch, and then you release pitch a little, and you keep going back up to pitch. The peak of every bend is pitch, and you go flat below it to go on a vibrato bend, which is completely the opposite approach when you're doing vibrato on a note without a bend. So there, you know, you can't go flat. You pull the string and you go sharp. So you're vibratoing on the sharp side. There aren't any hard and fast rules about the width. I would call it the width of the vibrato, which is what you're saying, depth. A wider vibrato is going to sound.
I play with too many synthesizers.
Okay. The wide vibrato is.
Sorry, I play with a lot of synthesizers. They use depth.
Oh, they call it depth. The depth of vibrato. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we can call it depth. That's fine. You know, whatever the term is, just whatever we agree it is to so that we're talking the same language.
Yep.
And as the pitch fluctuates, if it's a wide or deep vibrato, then it's going to sound a little more wild. You know, I think of Yngwie was the first. Well, not really the first. Randy Rhoads had a nice wide vibrato on, you know, in certain cases, at least on a string bend. And, but Yngwie kind of took it to another level, even wider. And I guess partly that was because he's playing on a scalloped neck, and it's a little easier to do a wider vibrato on a scalloped neck. I've got a guitar with a scallop. I scalloped it myself, and I always love playing on it just because you get that extra degree of intensity with the wider vibrato. Back in some of the guitar players in like the surf stuff in the 60s, they played with a super narrow vibrato that was often some of the players would almost sound like they're pulling it sharp out of key a little bit. I think of, what's his, Leslie West, Mountain. If you listen to that stuff, Mississippi Queen, listen to the vibrato that he has, you know, it's a very fast kind of vibrato. And that was kind of more of a 60s thing. If you want to sound like that, well, that's, you know, you can do that. So my thought is, I just want control of the vibrato. You know, I want to be able to control the speed of it. I want to be able to control the depth of it. And if I want it to sound more like 80s virtuosity, what you want is a wide and pretty slow, like not slow, but controlled vibrato that's smooth. And I think the key to getting that is start and think of it as a series of bends. Like, don't just bend up and then try to shake your hand, because that's going to create the 60s kind of vibrato. But instead, bend up, back down, back up. Make sure you hit pitch again. Then try it again and again. And if you get used to coming back and hitting that same pitch every time, and after you get the flow of that at a slow speed where you're thinking bend, release, bend, release, bend, release, bend, bend, release, bend, release, bend, release, bend, then you then go bend, 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 bend. You can do it a little faster, it'll stay controlled. And the key is anything that you want to control on the guitar. If you try to shortcut and take a leap forward without building up to it, you're going to find that it's going to shoot you in the foot. You're not going to get control, because if you need control to do a certain motion, and you skip that point of getting control, you know, you're never going to get control by playing a 60s fast vibrato and trying to slow it down. However, I have to put this in. That's true for left-hand stuff, and vibrato is a good example of that. When it comes to picking, though, the story is more complicated than that. It's almost the opposite, because the pick finds stability at speed, and you find the right motion at speed too. And if you're practicing slow, you're literally practicing the wrong motion. And so taking it slow and trying to speed up slow is what runs you into brick walls. And so for that, you have to come over here and get the fast motion. And then, of course, the trick to all this is that the left hand in synchronization with the pick needs to be slow. The right hand motion needs to be fast. And so it's hard to get these worlds to merge. And that's often what is holding people back from being able to play faster. And and of course, I've hit that in a number of the videos here, that concept, and that's in Sound and Story. But for me, it's kind of an evolving concept. I'm always finding different or better ways to demonstrate that and bring that together, because it's such a difficult thing. And I guess that's part of the reason guitar is so intriguing to so many people, is because the technique is, it's not an easy instrument to play. Do you have any?
It looks easy on television.
Well, hopefully.
I have one more.
Yeah.
It's okay. So it's kind of about this idea of the immediate bend. I literally cannot hear you play the immediate bend. Like, I can't hear the transition from the original note to the bent note. It's almost as if you go whoop and it's just done. Is that what it's supposed to be like? I have to slow it really far down. Right.
There are so many different ways to bend a string, and that's what is cool about guitar. You know, you can take the same note and the same bend and do like 4 different things with it, and each one musically sounds completely different, even though it's the same note. But immediate bend, you know, if you pick the note sort of as you are coming up, you don't really hear the increase to pitch, but it doesn't sound like a pre-bend. If a pre-bend, you get to pitch and pick it, it just sounds like you're playing the higher fret, you know. And
right, and you find out that it was a pre-bend when the guy lets go.
Right, exactly.
You find out it's a pre-bend when you let go, right? Okay.
That's right. And so the immediate bend, though, it has a little bit of a different front end to it, but like you're saying, it's sometimes it can be so fast that you don't really hear the pitch, but you kind of learn, especially as you do a lot of like transcription where you're learning people's solos or whatever by ear, it has its own sound. And when you hear that, oh, I know that's the bend up to pitch, you know, and it just sort of becomes its own thing. What I do a lot is I do slow bends, because to me, I'm always looking for tension in music, tension in melody, because to me, it's the interplay of tension and resolution that make things sound interesting. That's what pulls me, tweaks my ear, and that's what makes me feel emotionally connected with the music. So I guess it's no surprise then that, you know, these slow bends that really travel over the course of a note, that's like in solo number 3, From the Heart. It's full of these kind of sluggish bends. And then there's also the kind of bend that happens, which is the reverse. So you have immediate bend, bang, right up to pitch. And then you have the slow bend, which would really be a diagonal line saying, I'm going to hit the note and then push it up. And then the opposite of that is I'm going to play the note, and then at the end, I'm going to just tweak that tail of the end of the note right up, which is probably the hardest one to play, what I call them, you know, blues tail bends. Good example of that in rock, listen to Eruption, and Van Halen, you know, he starts out, and then at the end of the first cadenza or whatever, he comes down slowly, chromatic. It's kind of like an A minor pentatonic blues chromatic Dorian thing. And as he's coming down, he's picking each note downstrokes, and you can hear tail bends on every single note, even though they're pretty quick. You know, they're not super fast. But as you hear it come down, you'll hear those little tweaks to the note pitches. And that's another way of, it has a very distinct kind of, it sounds, the only word that comes to my mind is sassy, but I mean, you can interpret it however you want. But
yeah.
Anyway, those are the 3 main approaches of bending up. And bottom line is you want to be able to control all that. And that requires a good sense of timing too, because as you do a slow bend, you need to know you need to be able to feel how long that note's going to last in order to get to the right pitch at the end of the note. So that requires not only bending accuracy, but it requires being able to feel the length of the note, which, you know, hopefully that's happening because chapter 1 starts out with, you know, pretty just eighth notes and, you know, eighth notes, quarter notes, and You know what I mean? You're playing with everything welded to pulse. And there was another reason I started out chapter 1 with that too, with kind of choppy rhythms that are based on eighth note pulse at a moderate speed, is because a lot of lead guitar players, people into rock, they want to play fast. Of course, we all want to play because, and that's fine. Speed is energy and it's intensity, and the music is energetic. So obviously we want that, but you really need to start with a firm attachment to pulse. If you miss that step, then as fast as you can play, everything you play is just going to be, you know, one thing. Everything's going to sound the same. You're not going to be able to play interesting phrases. Which another reason I started there, as it's not just a review, it's also to let people know that, hey, if I can't play this and actually play these musical phrases in time, well, that's a problem. And, you know, then there's something to work on. So, all right. That answer pretty good what you had in mind?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So Ken, Paolo, Tony, Collin, you're next on my list. How you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm good.
Awesome.
Awesome. How are you? How are you guys? Good to see y'all.
Yeah, doing good.
Question. Okay. I'd like to ask, related to your methods, about how far do you think I'd need to get, like this could include all methods like total rock guitar, metal rhythm, metal lead guitar. How far do you think I should be to be able to play like a lot of Jimi Hendrix's material, such as like Hey Joe and Little Wing and Voodoo Child and stuff like that? Because
Okay.
I've tried to play some of that stuff. I'm at about song 3 and it's still pretty tough.
Yeah. Well, you know, he's coming out of a blues phrasing approach. So what I would suggest is that, you know, you want to be competent with basic rhythm guitar stuff. So number one, you should be able to play, you know, the songs in total rock guitar, and not only be able to play them, but ideally, you know, tap your foot as you play. No matter how much the rhythm you play, whether it becomes sparse or whether it becomes choppy and syncopated, you should always keep a sense of where that pulse is, because the ability to do that with material in total rock guitar is actually easier, much easier than the rhythms that Hendrix is going to be using for the most part. So you definitely want that. If you skip that step and you don't have a good enough flow with timing, blues timing is going to be really difficult, because where blues is more advanced is in terms of rhythmic intricacy, basically, you know, as a whole.
Oh, okay.
So definitely do that and get that going. And now on lead guitar stuff, I would say, you know, if you can get up to maybe certainly chapter 3, you know, up to, you can play through that song from the heart. You got bending control, and you can play with some rhythmic precision. Chapter 2 is probably fast enough. There's not going to be anything in Hendrix for the most part that is all speed dominated. And by the time you get to that chapter, maybe even 4, you've got the essentials. So what I would say is, yeah, keep going through, you know, total rock guitar, get in and at least finish rhythm guitar volume 1, get to halfway through lead guitar. And at that point, what I would encourage you to do is pick up a book called Blues You Can Use, which is a really...
I actually have that book.
Oh, yeah, you told me that actually, now that you mentioned that. And start working with some of that. Now, I don't know how far you'd need to go through that, but you sink your teeth into that pretty good. And at that point, I think that some of the Hendrix stuff is going to be within striking distance. Now, now it depends. It depends on the song. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you're going to find some of his things that are like, okay, you can latch on to that. I'm not a big Hendrix guy. I mean, I'm familiar with some of the stuff. I'm sure I learned some of it here and there. But, you know, for me, I just never liked his tone. And that's what got in the way, because if his tone doesn't inspire me, if his tone inspires you, I mean, he's a very good player when you're going more into the blues stuff. Voodoo Child's pretty cool song. I like that one because, of course, that's more up my alley. It's more aggressive and defined and
so true.
So anyway,
has precision.
Yeah, he's playing with a lot of aggression and yeah,
I really like his creativity in his playing. That's what I'm drawn to about it.
I absolutely, you know, and just because I say, you know, that I'm not like a real Hendrix fan doesn't mean that I'm not able to appreciate what it is that people appreciate about his thing. You know, generally speaking, I'm just not a blues fan at all, because to me, blues guitar playing, it suffers from, and now that's my word, I'll put it in quotes, suffers, because it's my personal preference. It suffers from the same thing that jazz suffers from, which is it just keeps going and it doesn't make any declarative statements that are that I can sink my teeth into, you know. So I like, you know, stuff that is more triumphantly positive, powerful, complete, finished. I want to feel the resolution, and sometimes jazz doesn't resolve. Blues is a little similar to that in one way in particular, that blues has a lot of repetition, and they'll use the repetition to build this bass line and then create the variations off of it. But it's a little too much repetition for me. I hear the guy playing the same lick, the same lick, and then changes to the 4-chord. He's still playing the same lick. I'm like, okay, I heard it. You know what I mean? I want more contrast. So, so blues requires a little more patience to listen to, and I don't think I have that much patience, I guess. But anyway, that's just where I'm coming from.
We all have our inclinations.
Yeah. But
that's about it. Thanks so much for the well thought out answer and sharing your experiences about blues and Jimi Hendrix, etc. Awesome. Cool. Next person or whatever.
Okay, thanks, Collin. Yeah, I don't know if it was well thought out, but hopefully it came out that way.
I appreciated it.
Okay, cool.
It did.
Janis, how are you doing? How's Latvia?
Hi. It's very cold and winter outside.
Yeah, that's
finally. Yes, we can finally skiing and skating, and since 3 years, this is the best winter we have. Very cold and snowy and nice.
Nice. I'm familiar with the cold and the snow part because I lived in Wisconsin, which is pretty cold. But Wisconsin doesn't have any good ski hills, and so I snowboarded for a few years, and I liked it a lot because I had a friend. My brother actually lived in Colorado, and I went to some real hills. But after doing that, it's kind of hard to enjoy a 200-foot descent. You know, if that's all you got. But anyway. Yeah, so you got, what have you been thinking about guitar-wise?
Yes, about this Jimi Hendrix maybe.
Yeah.
And about groove and rhythm in music. I find out that the best groove experience I heard from Stevie Ray Vaughan playing Voodoo Child.
Oh, yeah.
And this is why I think, yeah.
Stevie Ray Vaughan played like a freight train. I mean, I've never seen anyone more physically in part of a groove and in the groove. I don't know if I saw his live performance on Montreux or That and it's pretty amazing. Now, I have to qualify when I was just saying to Collin about blues and being repetitive. Well, anything though, any style done well enough, you know, can hold interest and be good. And I think for me, like if I was going to point to any blues player, well, okay, Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan, probably the two best. And I actually prefer Stevie Ray Vaughan because he has more precision. I like his tone better, and he has this unstoppable groove. Like once he gets in it, you don't know exactly where he's going to go, but he goes somewhere, and it's always perfect, you know? So, you know, you can tell he's lost in the improvisational frenzy of it, and it's pretty cool. So yeah, his grooves are awesome. And if you want to develop that, my suggestion would be grab a couple of his songs and start emulating that, because as you do that, because so much of his style and his sound is about that, you can't play that stuff and play it well without getting some of that. So it's gonna help.
The question was, I find out that playing guitar, this groovy songs is very physical and hard. And after 10, 20 minutes, you are exhausted from the noise and the all energy, and you feel like you are out, and no, well, it's physical.
Well, it is. And that's probably been one of my big mantras over all the years of everybody that I've ever been teaching, is that people don't appreciate the physicality of groove enough. They vary, most guitar players. So, you know, well, first of all, in the round numbers, as I understand it, the people that study this sort of thing claim that 80% of guitar players are beginners. And the level of you guys and intermediate and up is, you know, already a very small minority. But certainly beginners, for the most part, have a vague idea of pulse and don't really get that. And then even intermediate players usually underestimate the importance of it. So this is my mantra, always coming back to say, hey, groove is physical. You got to tap your foot. You got to, you know, bang your head or move as you play. And that's going to keep you in a regular time. And only then will you really be playing well. When I'm like recording or tracking something, I can't tell you how many times it's like, okay, I'll play it and I'm playing it right. And then I'll come back and I'll listen to it and I'm like, the groove just doesn't quite, it doesn't feel strong. It doesn't feel powerful. I'll go back over it, maybe turn up the drums a little bit so that I can actually feel it, and I'll move with it a little more, and everything becomes extra precise. And when that happens, everything sort of becomes alive, and you play with the music in a way that you don't otherwise. And it definitely takes a different mindset to realize that it is physical. But the fact that you get that, you know, tells me that your rhythms are on track to becoming really, really well played. So, I mean, you get good at what you practice. And that's the problem, is that if people don't really know what the vision looks like, they don't really know what they're trying to achieve, then they're never going to get there. You're just going to be going in circles, you know? So I appreciate your comment, and you're definitely on the money with that one. Do you have any follow-up with that real quick, or is that pretty much what you were wanting to get at?
It's okay. I got it. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Tony, I saw that you had your hand up. Were you wanting to?
Yeah, I wanted to tell you guys. Yes, sir. Check this out. If you want to see people who get the physicality of groove, metal isn't the same way as a lot of other styles, because a lot of metal guitarists just stand there. But go watch a funk band. Go watch Parliament. Go watch Earth, Wind, and Fire. Watch Prince's band. I mean, when Prince does something like this, it's to the beat.
Oh, yeah.
And all they do is move to the beat. When the players play, they step from 1 foot to the, like, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And you can watch them play and you can borrow that style. It'll get you moving on. Maybe it'll be to the point where it'll be like an exercise program. Those guys don't stop. That's all my comment. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, you know, that's the beauty of being open stylistically to listen to the different styles and see what it is that makes them tick, you know, and what's appealing about them. I've got my own limitations that way, though. You know, sometimes I hear what passes for music in some of the hip hop stuff. Oh my God, I'm having trouble finding some redeeming musical value there. But you know, and I'm okay with rap too. I mean, I don't have a problem with that because that can be clever, and it obviously you move into the lyrical aspect, but there's also sometimes some very interesting rhythmic interplays going on. And you know what, even rap vocals have what I would call I guess proto melody, because inflection is a kind of melody to a degree. And of course, I mean, I guess you guys know, if you listen to the songs that I've been putting out, there are even segments in there that are sometimes, you know, in that vein, my own way, I guess. Yeah, you guys, we have a little bit more time. If anybody's got some follow-up comment on any of the other comments or anything else that has popped into your mind that you want to talk about.
Actually, I had a question.
Sure.
So it was kind of to Paolo's, as he was talking about, you know, as you were coming up with how to develop your methods. In rhythm guitar, you've got the beats per minute noted. But I noticed that once you get into lead guitar, that no longer exists. Was that by design, or what's the reason behind not having that tempo on the lead guitar methods?
Well, I guess originally that was probably oversight, in the sense that those lead guitar methods were originally written in 1986. And, you know, I wasn't thinking too much about specifically tempos in regard to things. I think we used a click track. I don't even know if we probably in the studio, we probably just got a comfortable level. And I basically knew what the different grooves would feel like. And I suppose I should, I can put those up, you know, I can, you know, run a click to them and basically figure out pretty quick what the tempos are within a beat or two anyway. But at the time, I think it was oversight more than anything, or, you know, things have changed a lot in music, and the levels of details of how we practiced, and, you know, these things have developed a lot. I know a lot more now than I did, you know, gosh, how many years ago was that? 35 years ago. Wow. So anyway, there's that. But on top of that, in some respects, a case can be made that it isn't really necessary, because if you are, you know, like in speed mechanics, you're working with a metronome, and it's very oriented there toward, you know, toward knowing your baseline, knowing where you are, and trying to get faster speeds. I talk about using a metronome with the speed exercises, you know, so that's kind of encompassed in that approach, where you want to get more picky and dig deeper. Whereas the main lead guitar method was kind of more intended for just to jump in and play music, and sometimes not knowing your tempo can be a little bit of a blessing in a sense, you know, like, because it takes your focus to the music itself, to the hearing does your bend sound good? Does it, does it work? Are you in time with the backing track? And that's, a case can be made that that's what's really important anyway. So I always think of a metronome and specific tempo as kind of just a drill down to a deeper level. And it has its place, but I wouldn't really recommend that people spend all their time there. I mean, I think practicing too much with a metronome is sometimes a bad idea because it can distract you from what your fingers are doing. So I like to bounce around a lot in both in tempos and in techniques and styles, and also with and without a metronome. Any other thoughts?
If no one else is going to ask a question, I'll ask another one if that's cool.
That's cool.
I wanted to know what, sweet. I wanted to know what kind of, like, I know a couple of like your formative influences are in music, guitar, or just music generally. Like I know that you liked Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads and Beethoven. That's about all I know.
Yeah. Okay.
Just like if you wanted to share your thoughts on such things.
Okay, sure. Well, the first inspiration that I had to play guitar in the first place was Kiss, actually, because I had never heard anything quite like that. It was like late 70s, and Rock and Roll All Night was on the AM radio. So I mean, I wasn't particularly into music. Well, go back and if you're old enough to remember what 70s pop sounded like, so I just wasn't too into it, and one day, hearing on I still remember where I was at a friend's house and that song came on the radio and it had distorted guitar in it, which was the first time I ever heard distortion on a guitar. And the power of it was like, it just like caught my ear and I felt like riveted to that. I was like, wow, what is that? That's different, and it was the tone. So that's kind of that first starting point. And then when I got a guitar, I started, it was accessible. Their music was easy because they had, a riff that I could hear and then I could learn it by ear. I had been playing a clarinet in band, so I mean, I knew how to read music, but that music was not tabbed. You couldn't find anybody to show you how to play it. If you wanted to learn how to play it, you had to learn it by ear. So I started doing that, one note at a time. So anyway, the Kiss was the first one, but then it spread out to all the late 70s bands, and I mean, anything that had distorted guitar in it was fair game. So that's kind of where that started. But then in the late, I think, didn't Van Halen 1 came out in 78, I think. So sometime after that album came out, I don't know, maybe 6 months later or whatever, I heard Eruption. And of course, the precision and the speed and the energy, that had me pretty riveted. And so I learned all the notes of that whole first album a little at a time. I couldn't play them all well. I could play the songs and I could play some of it, but I mean, I was working on it. I used that to kind of cut my teeth to play faster. So he was a big influence. But Randy Rhoads turned out to be a bigger influence only because when I heard Randy's stuff, his note choices had more of a purposeful impact. I mean, Van Halen's great, but his music was more like party stuff and show off stuff, showpiece stuff. And that's cool. But Randy's had a seriousness that kind of appealed to me. And so I found myself more drawn to that. And I didn't like his tone on the recordings though, on his albums. It was gritty and fuzzy and kind of messy sounding to me. But I got a live recording off the radio, and the way that thing was mixed, his guitar was just awesome. And it had all the elements that I really like in a tone. And so that was a lot of, I mean, I learned everything off that. And then I started trying to figure out how to mic to get that tone. You know, that was a big impact. After that, around that time, I also took classical guitar lessons for about 6 months. I had learned Bach Lute Suite No. 4. It's a part of the classical guitar repertoire, you know, very, you know, common song for classical guitarists to learn. And I learned it, but I played it with a pick. And then I was trying to learn how to play real classical guitar on a nylon string guitar. And I did work with it a little bit to understand the fundamentals and play a little bit better. But ultimately, I could play so much better with a pick than I could even with my fingers, even across multiple string issues that I've like, you know what, I'm not going to master fingerstyle technique. You know, let's just move on and do what I do. So that was a big technique development. So that started with Bach. I learned a bunch of other stuff by Bach. Then Beethoven kind of came along later because his stuff is more advanced, more difficult. And when my skill level was up to it, I did that. Also, I did Vivaldi's Four Seasons. I played at least the summer concerto that I had adapted for a rock band. And anyway, so you know, that was pretty important. Paganini's 24 Caprices, I learned about half of those, performed a number of them. And so that was the skill side that kept going. You know, that was around the time I was finishing Speed Mechanics. I was doing Beethoven and Paganini a lot. So after that, my awareness of the music scene, like from the 90s, it stopped being about me, you know, learning other guitar players specifically, because I already had the technique and I already had the ability to express myself. I was interested in, you know, my stuff that I'm trying to write and record. And then, of course, I'm still in teaching though. So in teaching, people keep bringing in stuff, and I'll hear it and show them what's going on with it and how to get it down. So I've learned lots of other stuff by other players, but none of it really, you know, I'd say, yeah, that's good. I like that song. I like that solo. I like what he did here. But so I'd be learning, you know, Stevie Ray Vaughan or Jimi Hendrix, you know, I've played stuff like that. But of course it doesn't really stick because I don't keep learning it and keep playing it. I only learn it a little bit, you know, to demonstrate it, and it's kind of in one ear and out the other, you know. So a lot of players after that, then people say, well, who are you into? But once you've established yourself, like once you know who you are musically, your artistic vision, you hear the music you want to play and you feel the connection to it, everything you've learned wraps in to become part of that. And I can hear stuff now, and I could, you know, want to do different styles of, like, I'll hear, usually what I find most inspiring now isn't even bands, it's soundtracks. So I'll hear, you know, a soundtrack of something, and oh, that's a cool melody, that's a cool rhythmic interplay, or a set of tones, you know, blending this style with that style. Those are the things that are that I find intriguing now. So it's more about production and arrangement and songwriting or composition, you know, now, that instead of, you know, this or that band. All right, looks like we're about done with the hour, and I'm going to hope that this recorded properly so that I can format it up and put it up there. Another thing I want to say is we've been doing the second Saturday of every month. So I just want to put this out as it'll always be the second Saturday of each month. And I'm going to put on the schedule like all the months for the rest of this year. And so it won't, You won't have to be coming back to say, oh, wait a minute, which Saturday is it? So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for showing up and some good questions, and maybe be thinking
Thanks,
some more
Troy.
about whatever else is coming up. You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you
Thank
guys
you.
later then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, have a great day, everyone.
Too.